Hello, good evening, good afternoon, whatever time of the morning, day, evening it is around the world, wherever you're watching from. I have a very special guest. I have Ruth on, and she will. Ruth, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself real quick?
Hi, I'm Ruth Harrison, and my husband and I were in Asia almost 40 years, and I'm looking forward to this opportunity to reconnect with people I know and maybe some new people.
Awesome, awesome. So, for those of you that are looking for us on Facebook, we are, it turns out, not streaming on Facebook. So, welcome YouTube and everyone else that's watching. So Ruth, I want you to tell me a little bit about how did you come to know Jesus?
Well, I was really extremely blessed to have Christian parents and grandparents and aunts and uncles. And the earliest memory that I really have is I was probably a toddler, maybe 2.5. I don't even think I was 3, and sitting on my grandmother's, my dad's mother, sitting on Grammy Dee's lap, and she sang, "Oh, How I Love Jesus" to me. And also some other memories that were really significant was the time when I was born, actually, and in my life in those days, because after World War II, my dad came back from the war, and he wanted to go to college. And I was one of the older kids of the people that were students, and I walked across the campus to go to kindergarten. But it was my experience at Seattle Pacific, and I remember going to missionary presentations, and also then my parents took me to a lot of Bible camps, and they helped to start a church, the Auburn Bible Baptist. And so I was just surrounded by missionaries and pastors and a godly family. And when I actually made that decision, it was when I was at a camp, and the speaker was talking about John 3:16, and I didn't know what it meant, so I asked my mother, and so she quietly was explaining it to me while we were attending that. And so that's when I really became a Christian. And I was probably about 7.
Just a little bit of instruction, everyone. As you hear Ruth's testimony, feel free to ask questions in the chat. We will be monitoring them, and we're glad to have you. So tell us a bit about how you and Dave met. Give us a little more detail and be a little more, how did you two meet?
Well, so I decided when I was 5 years old that I wanted to go to Seattle Pacific because of my just a special opportunity. So that first year, I had probably my first boyfriend, but we only had a couple dates, and he was a member of the college group at Ballard Baptist Church. And the more I knew about him, the more I decided I didn't like him. And I wasn't thinking about marriage because I was planning on being a French teacher and going to France after I graduated. But Dave came along the next year, and he had come from Prairie College, Prairie Bible Institute, and we were attending the same church, in the choir and the college fellowship, and we were good friends. I thought maybe he was interested in another gal, because there were some gals from Prairie that had come also to Seattle Pacific, and he talked to them quite a bit. And so we didn't really actually have our first date until January, and I think it was toward the end. Went to a basketball game, and he was poor at the time because he was from Canada and he couldn't get jobs. So he couldn't afford insurance for his little Volkswagen Beetle. And so the next date was a month later, February, and we just did a lot of walking up the hill there in Seattle and talked, and we just had so much in common in terms of our values and things that we liked, and the things that I didn't like in the other guy, he checked all those boxes. And so we became really good friends. And I just remember that a gal who was sort of the leader for the college group, one day she said, "You're in love with him, aren't you?" And I said, "Yeah, I guess I am." I wasn't really even thinking. But my birthday's April 8th, and by April 8th, he didn't have any money for a ring, but we were unofficially engaged. And together we pulled our money, and we had enough in June for the ring, and we got married August 25th. After that, I didn't want to be a French teacher, and I became a legal stenographer and put him through college.
Awesome. Awesome. So just as a reminder to those who have joined us from Facebook, if you have any questions or comments, please put them in the chat. We will be watching for them. And we thank you for joining today. So when did you and Dave know you were going to serve in missions?
He had been exposed to missions most of his life because of being at Bible schools. And so he had a lot of that exposure. And he went to Prairie High School, Prairie Bible Institute. And in the summers, he worked for the Canadian Sunday School Mission with camps and a student pastor one summer. But he just decided that he wanted to be a teacher, and that's why he came to Seattle Pacific. And then after he graduated, he was teaching fifth grade in Port Angeles, where he got the job. And then he suddenly had an opportunity a year and a half later to move up to the high school. And about that time, our pastor was familiar with Trinity Western, was just getting started in Canada. And so Dave started thinking about he would rather move up rather than down because there was a levy that didn't pass in Port Angeles. And so a lot of the teachers were losing their jobs. And so he was asked to move back down from high school down to fifth grade. And he said he really felt that he didn't want to do that, although that's what my dad and our pastor, they thought he should do. And so in the meantime, while the other teachers were waiting to sign contracts, he got an opportunity to teach at the community college. And so about that time, and he was going to Oregon State to get his master's degree. And we thought that when he finished, then we would move back to Canada. And we had a place in mind. We were thinking about going to Fort McMurray in Alberta because they found oil there and it was a boom town and they didn't have churches and Sunday schools. And so we had a heart for that. But there was a Bible camp that needed a man to help to be the boys' counselor. And so he was able to spend a week doing that. And when he went, the missionaries were Bruce and Esther Kerr. And he called me. I was staying right in the place where I'm right now. I was with my parents and our two older daughters. And he told me that Bruce Kerr said that he thought God could use him to be a teacher in Hong Kong Baptist College. And I said, "You what?" Because we'd been planning to go to this city in Alberta. And I told the Lord I was willing to go where it was cold and isolated. And Hong Kong was just the opposite. So I was quite surprised. But I did go to the Wednesday night church service and met them. And we really felt that we might not qualify, but we thought we would put in our application. And it took a while. I think that the area director intentionally wanted to go slow just to make sure that he was sure that we really meant what we were doing. And so it took 2 years before we actually got to Hong Kong. But there was no question that it would be with CBFMS because that had been my parents' home. We were married there and we were living in Port Angeles, but we changed our membership back to Shelton and we were commissioned there and they supported us for 40 years. So there was never any question about WorldVenture, and it happened. We were open to missions, but we didn't ever expect that that's how what we would do.
So tell us about what you and Dave did. I mean, you served in a lot of different ways and a lot of different places in Asia. So tell us what you and Dave did with us and where you served.
So we started out in Hong Kong, and my life has really been upside down from what I expect. So we did go to Hong Kong, and we expect that we would stay there indefinitely and didn't have any thoughts of going anyplace else. But the situation there was not really what we expected, and it was difficult. And we really loved the people, but we just, we were even thinking about resigning. But so we were there working on Cantonese language study, which was really difficult for Dave. And we were helping rooftop chapels. And we were planning to work at Hong Kong Baptist College. And then Dave was a field leader 1 year. And I can tell you later maybe about a lady that we met that literally changed my life, but we can come back to that. And then so we were asked to go to Taiwan, or given that opportunity. And it was just a really wonderful experience for us. And the field there was not expecting suddenly to someone to come. And we were living in Taipei, and that was a place where we could meet people at the airport. We had like a guest facility, just so many ways. But we got involved, first of all, learning Mandarin there. Dave was teaching for 2 years at Bethany Christian School. We got involved in church planting, teaching at seminaries. I was helping with the CB Press, and did a lot of hospitality. And so then we were invited while we were there to go to Singapore. Titus and Helen Long were missionaries in Taiwan, and they invited us to give some seminars on missionary training. And we went there for a couple of weeks, and then we came back, but then we were asked to come back. So we spent 2 years at Asian Cross-Cultural Training Institute. And then we expected to we were back in Taiwan. And then we were there well, it's related to medical stuff. I can talk later. But anyway, so we ended up being asked to go to South Korea. So we went there, and Dave got involved in missionary training and teaching at a graduate school of mission, and also the English pastor of a large church there. And then after that, we were asked to go. We thought maybe after Korea we might retire, but we were asked by Ideas at that time to go to China. So we went to China, and we had to find our own situation to get a visa. And so Dave taught at a large university in Shanghai. Later, we taught at a college. And then after that, we were planning to move back to Singapore, where he was going to have a different position with WorldVenture, and he had a heart attack. And so we came home and we retired.
That's quite a lengthy. How many years was that? About?
Well, that was basic. It was really almost 40, and actually we spent quite a bit of time after we retired. So 40 would be about the right.
That's a lot of different places to serve. So you had mentioned, sometimes serving overseas, it can be, you never know what's going to happen. And we've, here at WorldVenture, we've heard of different people who've had to overcome medical challenges in order to continue serving, or God used that to bring them to serve in different places. You have a unique story in that you said in your bio that medical issues changed the direction of your ministry and your location. So how did God use these medical challenges that you've experienced, or for his glory?
Well, so our oldest daughter, Mary, had MS, and it was quite stable for sometimes long times. But then there was a time when she was in bed 5 out of 6 months. And at that time, Dave and I were teaching at our Shiloh Seminary. And so I just felt like I should come and help Mary. But our plans for that summer, we had been invited to teach missionary training on the Hana Gospel ship. And it was going to be out in the ocean out of Malaysia. So our plans were that summer to go on the Hana Gospel ship. And we actually had spent some other time helping them. And so with Mary's situation, I came back, but immediately when I got back, she was suddenly fine and didn't need my help. But he started having chest pain.
Mm.
And so because of that, and he was working on his doctorate at that time.
Wow.
So he came back and got checked up, and he had four-way bypass. So while he is recovering, and likely it saved his life because we came back because of Mary. So while he was recovering, that's when Western Seminary asked him if he would move, we would move to South Korea because they wanted to start a doctoral program in missiology. And he had gotten his training for that. And we worked with Don Smith a lot and had a special relationship. So that's when suddenly, well, we'll think about going to South Korea. And then later, so we were there, and that position never materialized, but instead we found other ways that we got involved. But in terms of medical things, so then when we were asked to go to China, of course, we had to have medical exams. I had physical checkups, everything was fine, but they said, no, I had a problem, and I had no idea what that was. And so it turned out that God just brought an angel actually into my life, Dr. Honore, a Black doctor from Togo, and he had married a Chinese gal. And so he was there, and he was working for some really special hospitals. So he arranged for me to get CAT scans once a month, and then in December to get a PET scan. And a team of doctors said that they thought it was probably 80% benign, but I should have surgery. So in February, I had surgery, and I was in the hospital for 16 days, and I had lung surgery. And I thought it was lung cancer, but I found out from a specialist last year that, well, it's carcinoid, not really exactly as bad as cancer, lung cancer, but I had part of my lung removed. And so that was really the beginning of medical ministries, because suddenly we started connecting with doctors. And in fact, then we moved to a smaller college in a smaller city. And while we were there, Dave started having chest pains in 2006. And at that point, we were planning to move back to Singapore. We even had an apartment that was already waiting for us. But he had, about Easter time, he had a problem when we got to Shanghai. And of course, we wanted to get to that special hospital. And we went to see them. And actually, the guy that was on duty had been one of the doctors that had helped in my surgery. And he still remembered us several years later. And he had a photo of us with them, and we went out for lunch. And he was the guy that was at the desk. And he said, we'll come back in the morning and we'll do some tests. And we didn't know it, but he had a heart attack that night. And so he spent 10 days in the hospital. And then after that, when we retired, then I made connections at a church where one of the doctors had Partners for Life emergency medical training. And when she learned about our connections in China, she asked if I would help. So I helped them on 3 different years to take teams. And that resulted in going to some very big hospitals, doing videos of fake accidents. And I was in one of those videos, and it was on television, and it was in the Shanghai newspaper and other newspapers. And then later, because of God just given us lots of connections. So another friend of a friend of a friend, her mother was the owner of a very large Christian hospital that likely they maybe have 1,000 or more beds now. I tried to get, but it's a very huge, and it was a Christian one. And so they asked if we would come. So Dave and I, and it was maybe 2008, we spent 30 days. And the goal was to try to explore mission opportunities for maybe somebody coming to work in that hospital. And we spent 30 days there. And I taught the nurses and he taught the doctors for medical English. And we were asking God and praying some way that we could connect with those people. And suddenly it was hot there, and I went to get a glass of cold water and get some water out of the refrigerator, and I took a sip of it, and I realized it was not water. And they had a new maid working that day, and she had put cleaning stuff in the refrigerator. And I ended up in the ER. And so suddenly I connected with the hospital staff, and they brought all kinds of gifts, and the doctors and nurses came. And so God just uses interesting things.
Yeah. Oh, that's hilarious. I mean, sad that you end up in the emergency room, but absolutely hilarious.
Unforgettable.
I bet. So, you know,
Well, I could add one more thing.
Oh, yes, please. Yes.
One more thing is my daughter, Mary, because I don't like to drive. I haven't driven most of my life. Dave always did it. And so she was going to drive me to see a hip doctor because I was going to have hip surgery. And this was like November 2022. And so we arranged, I was going to drive the car into town and go to the post office and then drive up to their home. And she was driving me to this doctor's appointment, the very first time to see this specialist. And as I came out of the post office, getting ready to go up to her house, I got a phone call from my granddaughter who was living at home. And she said Mary couldn't swallow. And she was in tears. And so I had to go to the hospital and find the doctor myself. And frankly, I was ill prepared. I didn't even have his address because I knew she knew where to go. And so she was in the hospital, and then they moved her actually to a different hospital closer to Seattle, and she was in ICU for 4 days. And she needed a feeding tube and was not even able to get that removed, I think, until this last May. And so all of that was pretty scary, not only for her, but the fact that if it had happened maybe 15 or 30 minutes later, we would have been on the freeway going to that appointment. So God has just worked in amazing ways. So even in this case, medical issues were really a big issue. And actually it saved my life, likely, that we were asked to go to China, because I would never have known there was a problem.
Oh, wow. So what I talk about a lot with different missionaries, and I hear different missionary stories after they spend years on the field, and then they use the word retirement, and I almost laugh because it's not, we call it retirement, but you all are still as active as if you were on the field. So what does retirement look like for you after the fact? After you both retired, what did you get involved in, and what does it look like now?
Well, it was really like a lot of different seasons in my life, and it was really 17 years ago that we came back from Shanghai, and we came back in 2006. And officially retired in 2007. And so my grandmother died that year, and that was very special because she actually moved in to live with my parents, and I live on family property. And so my parents were living next door to where I am right now. And so when she was 100, she moved in to be with my folks, and she died when she was 106 and a half. And I was privileged to happen to be there at the time for another purpose, just when she was passing. And so I was there as some of my niece and my parents and my granddaughter. We were there and sang the doxology with as we were together as my grandmother went to heaven. So that was 2006. And then soon after we got here, we started building a house, because we had built a two-car garage in 1993 because we needed a place for storing the car, for our stuff, having a place where family members could stay if they came to see my parents. And so we had this garage, and we were going to build a house, because where I am right now was a really old cabin. And so we had that. And then we decided, well, we would convert that garage. We used to call it the garage house. And so we were going to make that into a house. So we spent maybe a couple of years working on that, 2007 and 8. And then we both made some mission trips several times. And we were teaching at a missionary training institute in South Korea and visited in Hong Kong. And we made trips to China. And so we both made some of those trips. Then I helped the Partners for Life on 3 trips. And then another season would be my parents, because they live next door here and were seemingly in good health, although my mother had been hit by a car when I was a senior in high school. So she lost her leg, and so she was an amputee. But in 2009, my dad suddenly had a very severe stroke. And so he needed a caregiver because my mother couldn't care for him. And so from 2009, he passed away in 2015. So that was a very long season. And it was really difficult. My parents were married almost 73 years. And she was just lost without my dad. And so she got dementia for the last couple of years of her life. And she passed away in 2020. She passed away 2021, and my dad passed away in 2015. And so then, besides my parents' health, then Dave's health started declining, and I was really concerned about how were we going to be able to afford long-term care, because it could be 5 or 10 years that he would live, but he was going to need care, and I wasn't even sure if I would be able to help him. And so on August 8th of 2017, he wasn't feeling very well. And basically for about 2 years, we had not been going very many places at all, except basic shopping and to the see medical people. But that morning he wasn't feeling well. And so I called 911. And so that's the day when they came, and it was unbelievable. In fact, I brought something just with me that you might find interesting. He was wearing some ugly clothes because he seldom went out. But when he was going to go in the ambulance, I said, well, can you change your shirt? And he was sleeping downstairs in my den because it was easier that way for him downstairs. And I have no idea how he found this, but he changed. And this was on the shirt he was wearing. Which is the logo, the original logo for our mission. And then besides that, I even brought this over because I have this hanging by my stairway. So this was a T-shirt that we had gotten from the 45th anniversary of our seminary in Shiloh, and it says "Jesus loves you" in 3 languages.
Nice.
And actually, I think my grieving really took place as I saw him declining and how hard that was for him. And so when this day came, in so many ways that God worked in so many ways, it was a time when people still knew him. His memorial service was very significant. And my daughters and I, we just felt peace. And we were thankful that God had blessed us with the life that we'd had, and God blessed us in keeping us from going through a lot of pain. And so that's when I became a widow. But I'll just never forget that day and the blessing it really was. And to be able to have that witness, he actually had a heart attack on his way to the hospital. And so he was really gone by the time that I got there with my brother. But even the shirt he was wearing was a testimony that I just felt we couldn't ask for anything better, actually, than how God planned it. So then I became a widow, and that's when I started helping John Chong, because I had known him when he was a high schooler in Hong Kong, 1970 to 74. And he became a Christian while we were there. And in fact, I even have a report that Dave wrote that he was helping the rooftop schools, and he led 12 of the students to become Christians. And he had always wanted to draw a cartoon book of the life of Jesus. And so he didn't really do much about that. He was able to he was able to come to the United States, and I should mention why that was so important. I wasn't happy in Hong Kong that I couldn't go with Dave to the Chinese church services and work on building relationships with Chinese and learning Cantonese. And I had to go with my 3 daughters to the English service. And the kids got sick on 2 of those Sundays. But in 3 Sundays, one Sunday I went with my daughters. And in between Sunday school and church, there was a visitor in Hong Kong. And so when I was talking to her just to get some information, she said she was an artist. And so I said, well, I sure wish that you could meet John Chong. So we were busy that night, but she met him in the hotel. And then they corresponded, and she left the next day. And I talked to her maybe 10 minutes. But that's how Mrs. Deal came into our lives. And she invited him to come and finish his education. So he graduated from high school in Wenatchee. And then she wanted him to get a good education. So she moved down to Southern California. And that's where he got more training with art there. And then he went back to Hong Kong and finished basically all of the courses for seminary training. And there was one project he wasn't able to do because of working and care for his parents. But and then later he moved to Canada. And so it was about 9 years ago that he started working on the drawings. And I was helping him with correcting the English text. And so by the time he got up to the 3rd chapter, then we talked about, well, what if we were to make a book? So that's how we got involved with that. And so that was part of my season of life, has been helping John. And I should add that I needed new friends. And so I made some friends in Olympia at the Sunday school class of the church. And God put me at that particular class. I was going to go to 4 classes and see which one I felt was the best. And that very first one of those 4, the teacher was not there. And so one of the class members was taking over, and he was talking about discipleship and working together. And he was involved in prison ministries. Mm. And so this guy, Steve, is the one that he not only introduced me to Crossroad Prison Ministry and also to Bridges to Life, a program that was held at the local men's prison. And then he invited me to go with him to visit the men in maximum security. And so I did that until I made a trip to Asia in 2019 in November. And so I was in Taiwan and South Korea for 4.5 months. And that was just one of the highlights of my life, was the 4.5 months that I spent there. And then in June 2021, we were able to get the first book published. And so my season that I'm in right now, I'm working on book 2 to get book 2 ready to print hopefully this year. And basically I'm downsizing because my plan is move out of my house. I'm going to sell it to family members, my nephew's in-laws, and he's going to, so my son-in-law, my nephew is going to have grandparents living on either side of them. So he lives in between me and his parents. And so I'm downsizing. I need to be out in about 2 years. So I am trying to go through all my stuff, which is immense, trying to donate a lot of books and downsizing, getting ready for this next stage. And it'll be quite a project to get that finished.
So tell me more about John and how this book of illustrations. Tell me about the book. What's it called? What's its name? Do you have one with you?
Oh, certainly I do. Now, actually, I got 7,500 in the first printing and
Nice.
another 7,500 in the second printing. For the first one was for prison ministry,
Okay.
and then the second printing was for nonprofit ministries, because we're hoping we can find nonprofit ministries. And I've also been sending out an edition. This is an article Dave wrote in 1975 about John and Hong Kong. And I don't know which way, but so this is an article that was published in summer of 1975, and it shows John with his drawings of where he lived and the resettlements and so forth. And I have gotten, and so I've already donated mostly to Prisoners for Christ, and also any requests. Sometimes chaplains will ask for a box carton of 48. And I have gotten some responses. I think I've already donated maybe about 5,000 to Prisoners for Christ alone, and I'm just trying to reach out and make a lot of contacts. And so we're still in the initial stage, because as far as from my perspective, we're not really we're not finished until we get 2 books, because he's only been able to do the first 3 chapters. Now he's working on the rest of the story, which is so important. And even I wondered, how can we bridge that gap if people don't have book 1? And so what I've decided is that instead, I went through the table of contents, and instead of having the page numbers, we're going to have where are the places where those are from. So the references are going to be what's in the back. Instead of the contents, it's going to be the list of all of the stories that are in this book. And let me see.
Yeah, we have Nathaniel Ting who wants to see the pictures.
Oh, and that's my grandson, Nate. Now, we also have some of these books in color in the back.
Nice.
Although because of the cost, and these are not for sale, so to save on costs, then he has these pages, but most of it is in black and white.
Awesome.
And so I've mostly I'm trying to make connections and find places that want the books. And recently I made a really good connection in Oregon that I think could be really very significant, because somebody there has connections with all the superintendents of all of the prisons in Oregon. And they're also working with Corbin University, and they've got college courses that they're working on as a united program. So that's really, really positive. But I just thought, just to give you some feedback. So the gal D is the gal that I connect with at Prisoners for Christ. And she said, hi, Ruth, I wanted to share with you this awesome opportunity that PFC has chosen to be part of. And the Emmanuel book was specifically requested. There's a prison ministry in Texas, through God Comes Justice, that holds a holiday event each year called Christmas Hope. Emmanuel was requested by the chaplain for the gift boxes of the children of those incarcerated for the age 12 plus category. And Prisoners for Christ gifted the ministry 288 books of Emmanuel. We asked of them to provide us testimonies and photos and so forth. And so that was from her. Then another guy said, a chaplain in Virginia, greetings. We've had so many requests for the story of Jesus in cartoon booklets. I now have a request to get it in Spanish. If this is available, please send me 10. So that's going to be a prayer request. I'm hoping to get somebody to help me with a translation for the Spanish.
So if people wanted to help you with the translation in the Spanish, how can they contact you?
Oh, so the contact would be Dave Ruth in Asia, all one word, DAVERUTHINASIA @gmail.com.
Okay.
And just if I could go back, there's one from somebody said, this was D said, I have a tall question. The book listed below is a huge hit at our facility. I was wondering if I could get enough to gift the book to all of our guys at Christmas. The big need is I would need 196 of them in order to get one to everybody. Is that even possible? If not, I completely understand, but they thought they would ask. And so I'm getting lots of requests and feedback, but the one that is most touching is really, Prisoners for Christ actually got this letter from a prisoner. And this is from somebody named Mark. And he said, Dear Prisoners for Christ Ministries, hello, my name is Mark, and I won't say his last name, and I am an inmate, and this is in Pennsylvania. I'm writing because I and most guys on the block were able to read Emmanuel, an illustrated story of the life of Jesus. It was great. And one guy even said, it is the first religious book I've ever read. And I believe that animated book actually made a serious impact on several of the guys that read the book. As for myself, I am a born and raised Christian, committed to Christ at age 12. I would seriously appreciate, and he's got that in caps and underlined, any and all Christian literature you can send me via mail. I don't have people on the outside to communicate with, and I'd love it if someone at Prisoners for Christ would write to me. As for Emmanuel Book 2, I'd love to have that and see if you could tell me how to get a copy. There is only a part-time chaplain here and no current religious services at this facility. I thank you for the book. I will also tell you that the book beautifully illustrates the gospel and makes them to life, makes them really understandable. Please send me a letter, mail, whatever you have available so I can continue my religious studies. Thank you so much and God bless. And that's from Mark.
Awesome. Ruth, one thing first. We have Janelle Julian. She says, how do you make the connections at the prisons? Do you connect with prison chaplains?
Well, so actually it started by connecting with the chaplain here when I started getting involved with the one here. And he even suggested that I write a letter to all of the other Department of Corrections for the whole state, which I did. And he gave me a letter even of endorsement. But sadly, it was during COVID and none of the chaplains wanted any extra books. Mm-hmm. And so basically it's just through different friends recommend a friend or they know somebody. And so that's how I just keep making more and more connections, and I'm still in the process. But I just wanted to add about this sure. Before I forget.
Yes.
So when I got a copy of this from Dee, and then I sent that to John. And so John wrote this letter in his own handwriting to this guy, Mark. And so it was just so special because he tells, he was the illustrator and illustrated story. I received your letter and I'm so moved and encouraged by your letter. Thank you so much for taking the time to write. I'm so happy to know that you've enjoyed reading the book and that the guys in your block are reading it too. Ever since I accepted Christ as my savior in high school, I've always wanted to tell other people about Jesus, but in my most comfortable way, which is drawing a comic book. This Emmanuel book is a dream come true for me. My goal of the book is to present Jesus as, as true to the four gospels as possible, so that people, Christian or non-Christian, will be able to know the true Jesus of the Bible. I'm still working on book 2 of Emmanuel. It is half done now, and I hope it will be printed in 2023. I will make sure you and the guys in your block will have copies of book 2 when it's printed. It will be available from Prisoners for Christ. Again, thank you so much for writing to us. Please keep on with your religious studies. God bless in Christ, Jonathan Chong. And I just thought that guy is going to be so thrilled to actually get a letter from the artist.
Awesome. Yes, definitely. That is a great honor. I mean, if I think everyone can relate to that, because when you have a favorite author or a favorite podcaster or a favorite person and you hear from them, it's just it definitely is such an honor because you know how busy they are. Can you tell me how can people pray for you personally and for your ministry? I just want to remind everyone out there, you can put comments and questions in there. And we want, and I'd like to explain that Ruth is a global specialist, which means if you wanted to help with this project, there's the giving link in the comments that you can click on and learn more about this, and you can make a gift if you feel led. But Ruth, go ahead and explain, how can people pray for you personally and for your ministry?
Well, I'll tie that in with one other thing I forgot to mention,
Oh,
and that
sure.
is
Yes.
that's a Cambodian ministry. So there's a couple, Radha and Saman Manickam, that I remember my parents used to pray for them every day because they were supported by the Shelton Church, and they were with CB Ministries, and he's from Cambodia, and they have refugee ministry living in Seattle, but he is training pastors in Cambodia, and they were visiting the Shelton Church this summer, and I had a chance to talk with them, and I showed him, of course, a book, and he showed me a book about his life, and so it was very special that time together. But this fall, he said, I am going to make a trip to Cambodia. Can you send me a box of the books? And so I sent him a box of 48. And then I think it was New Year's Day, he sent me another message, and he said, they, especially the young teenagers, really like that book. Can you send me another box of 48? I'm making another trip. So right now he's getting ready. He's taking the books, but I've talked with him, and he's going to see what are the possibilities of getting it translated into Cambodian. And so that's something that you can pray for. First of all, for me, I would say likely I'm going to need hip surgery again, the one I had this last February, almost a year ago. It went well, but likely I will need the other hip. And I intentionally postponed a dental appointment. I'm going to have a bottom central tooth pulled. And I said, can I wait until Monday? So Monday I will have the tooth pulled, and I thought it would be better to wait for that. And my arthritis is getting increasing. So pray for my health, because I just really earnestly hope I can help John get book 2 finished, and the condensed book of the both ones, 1 and 2, put together in one volume. So if I can get those done, I will feel like I have accomplished important goals that I have in mind. And I also have a new mission field that I am focused on. That's China, because I want to reconnect with students, or keep connected with teachers and students, and one administrator in particular. And so praying for my connection with some of those students that I had in 2000, primarily 2004 to 6. And also pray for Chinese house churches and pastors in China, because that's really a serious need. Mm-hmm. And the rest for my ministry would be focused around this book. I do hope that we can get a Spanish translation soon. We got a Google Translate edition, and a friend who's Hispanic said that she didn't think it would take very much to get that done. But I need to find someone who would know the language and could help to make sure that we could so I could get that printed. I will get that printed enough if we get the right translation. I also, this year, I plan to have somebody else to help me with the donations, with distribution, with connections, because basically John takes care of the drawings and the ISBN number in Canada, but the rest of it I've been doing. And so I need someone to help with that. And also there are a number of prison ministries that we have offered to give them the files to do their own printing, as long as they acknowledge him as the artist and protect his copyrights. And so I'm making some very significant connections, but they haven't made decisions yet. And also getting book 2 finished and printed is going to be a major project that I appreciate prayer. But we're already looking into other apps and videos and tablets, other ways besides printing books. And so we've made some significant connections and we're waiting for responses from them. So there's a lot of unknown. I know that I'm on the right path, but I really don't know where it's going. So it's,
Yeah.
I just appreciate prayer for getting this book 2 finished and how God opens up opportunities.
What is the financial need for for this project?
It'll likely cost, we'll probably get less in terms of for the next book. We probably won't order as many, but I'm guessing it'll likely be a minimum, probably of $15,000 for getting the next printing.
Okay. So if everyone heard those prayer requests, as we move into the next segment and close in on our time, I want to remind you, you can ask questions, you can leave comments. The giving link her ministry link is up in the chat there if you'd like to take a look and explore. Her email is also in the chat, and you can feel free to contact her after this broadcast is over. But I want to, if you feel inclined, if you write out a prayer in the chat, we may use your prayer as our closing prayer time. So if you'd like to put a prayer in the chat and write it out, it could be something like, "Dear Lord, I lift up," and you can go on just as a template for you. So let me explain what WorldVenture in Review is. WorldVenture in Review is where we interview some really fantastic, inspiring people like Ruth who are doing amazing things and creative things. And we also talk about different topics that our social media has been bringing up in the past week or so. So if you missed any of our stories, we're going to go into this next segment because Ruth, in her experience as a missionary, is basically can talk into these things, and we may learn a little bit more about her ministry. So we just recently put out a post to pray for more pastors in Brazil. And this is from our one of our global workers down in Brazil, who actually is quite busy this month, actually preaching everywhere and trying to fill some spots where there are no pastors. As Scripture says, the workers are few, as we know. So if you missed that, that's over there in our Facebook in the past week. But thinking about all the lack of workers, that there's so many needs out there for people to step into and answer God's call to ministry. What needs exist in prison ministries right now? What needs, creative or otherwise?
Would you like me to step in on that?
Yes, please.
Okay. Well, so God has been working in an interesting way because I've been a mentor for Crossroad Prison Ministries for about 5 years. And so I get a lesson once a week usually. And then I correct a Bible lesson and I write a letter to that person. And in fact, I try to do it on 2 pages on both sides. So that's like 4 pages of information. And that's just something that I'm glad that I can make that contribution. And I never know who it's going to be from or where it's from. So every week it's a different person, different place. And I also, by the way, I also include my testimony as part of that lesson, just as a way of sharing that, although I don't share too much about myself. But as a result of this Crossroad Prison Ministry, I'm hopeful that they are going to be able to use John's not only the book, but also the files. And the CEO and the international director, at least, and maybe another vice president that I've had some contact with, they're already talking about how can they incorporate it into their work. And I forgot to bring the details, but it's like the CEO said, and I like him, really appreciate him a lot. He's a really humble guy that wants to share the gospel. And on an ordinary day, they have 20,000 lessons. And then if somebody completes a course, then they like to give a gift, and sometimes that's a book. So they have lots of ways that they could use the Emmanuel Project. But I was able to connect with their international director because he was new and he wasn't familiar with Asia. And as a result, they have quarterly meetings of their field leaders of different parts of the world. And he's invited me to join their Zoom meetings. And I don't say anything, but I've been observing and learning and hearing the stories. And so especially like in New Zealand, Australia, in Asia, and likely that's probably the same situation in Africa, they just desperately need more pastors, more mentors, and Bibles. And my heart was really touched, especially when I heard the report from the field leader for Oceania in New Zealand. And so many places, they don't have enough staff in the prisons. So even if they get a Bible lesson, it's hard for them to even handle the correspondence for the lesson. And it takes sometimes a year just to circulate from the headquarters back and forth. And so they're trying to think about how they can get better ways for their overseas ministry. And they've got like 9,000 students and 25 countries. And so just this last week, I've had contact with Peggy, the leader in New Zealand, and she's very interested in the book, and she wanted to buy 20 or more books. And so I said, well, I'll send you some books, which I have. And so I just mailed those this week. They're going to look them over, and we're looking into the possibility of having the books actually printed locally. So I'm checking on that. And besides that, there's just such a need for more pastors, more chaplains, more staff workers in the prisons. And for instance, in the case of New Zealand, when she gave a report, it was like 8,500 people in prison, but half of them have not had their sentences determined yet. So they're just waiting. So they don't know where they're going. So as a Bible correspondence program, they can't do anything because the people are still waiting, half of them. And so I suggested, well, why not find a way for the Emmanuel book, and they can read the whole story of the life of Jesus while they're waiting to find out where they're going to be sentenced and how long that's going to be. So they're very interested in using Emmanuel. And right now already the international director and the CEO and the vice president are looking about how can we make this work. And maybe tablets in the prisons. There are all kinds of difficulties that they're having in the prison ministry, but there's a shortage of pastors and mentors and help, and especially people that don't have very good reading level, that in New Zealand, they're already using what they call it's manga, Japan style, manga Messiah. And I looked that up, and it's very basic content, and the cartoons really don't look very realistic, but primarily it's the content. So John's book will be a great resource for them, and I expect they're going to be not only wanting to use it, but we're going to look into ways of getting it printed overseas.
Awesome. So just as a reminder to everyone, you heard that all the prayer requests. If you type in a prayer, we will use that to close our time. Ruth, did you want to add any last words to?
Well, my whole life has been so different from what I expected. And I never expected to get into this ministry. And it's ironic because literally kindergartners can draw better than I can. I literally tried to do a smiley face once, and I was embarrassed to have it on my paper. And so God puts me connected with John and to get involved in this project. And so many times I just think God's got a sense of humor. But I gave a presentation while I was in Taiwan. And my presentation, I said, an ordinary person but talking about the importance of relationships. And I just feel like that's really so true for me, because I am an ordinary person, but God has brought people into my life. But I'm hoping that there will be people that will see this and say, well, I know so-and-so, or I suggest this, or I've got a connection with somebody, or I could help with translation, or I could create Bible studies to go with the book. There are just so many ways that I would love to have people step in and be helpful.
Awesome.
But I won't draw anything.
All right. Well, thank you, Ruth, for joining me as my guest. As I've stated, we have Ruth's email in there if you'd like to contact her for further questions, or to maybe to talk about translation needs. We also have her giving link, her ministry profile link that you can click on in the chat. Janelle says, thanks to Ruth for being such a testimony of faithfulness to God's call in her life. Very inspiring. And Gay Austin says, that is awesome work.
I think my brother Bob Deffenbaugh works with and knows her husband. That's my guess. My brother works for Bible.org, and I think that her husband is connected with that. But I haven't heard it yet.
Yep. Oh yeah. And I would encourage you to, Gay, if you've heard that, if you want to connect with her,
it's a small world.
Yeah. It is a very small world. So anyway, thank you, Ruth. I just want to let you know for upcoming events, everyone, we have Matt and Elizabeth Van Wart from Uganda, who will be with us on the live stream on Thursday, February 29th at 8 a.m. Central Standard Time. We also have Campus Co-op. If you have some students in your life, Campus Co-op does a live stream every Monday night. So you can find it at worldventure.com/events. And our next Joshua Project prayer time will be on February 7th at 12 p.m. Central Standard Time. So I hope you all will join. Again, if you're watching this after the fact, when it's no longer live, leave your questions in the chat or email Ruth directly. And either way, we'll get the questions to her that she can answer. So thank you, Ruth. Make sure to stay on with me. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. But let's pray real quick. I always forget that part. I shouldn't, but I do. So let me close in prayer. Lord, thank you for Ruth's work. Thank you for how she is so inspiring to so many. And thank you for Jonathan Cho and for his amazing graphics. And I pray that more and more that people know you, Lord, that they come to see you through these graphics and get hungry for your word. I praise you for Ruth's work. Give Ruth strength and perseverance, and give Jonathan strength and perseverance, and all that are involved in this ministry. In Jesus' name we praise. Amen.
Amen.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We'll see you at the next live stream. Keep a watch on our events page. We'll be populating that with more.